and welcome back to the virtual FisherPoets Gathering. Oops, I don't have my good light on, but I have one, folks. Here we are. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. It is now the 8 o'clock hour. The lineup is up on FisherPoets.org, and I will also be introducing each of our next performers. First, I would like to go ahead and take a few moments to acknowledge the land we're standing on, or perhaps the land you're floating near. If anybody's on a boat tonight, I want to honor not only the land, but the communities who stewarded these places since time immemorial. I myself am on Lummi and Nooksack territory in Bellingham, Washington. Also fish in Yupik and Sugpiaq territory. So I would love you to join me in honoring the land that you're on. Thank you. Okay, and I also invite you folks to use the chat. Those on YouTube, it should be right there on the right side. The performers can't hear you, but we love knowing that your energy is there with us. So throw some exclamation points in there, some plus signs, some hoot and hollering. We'll be doing that here in the Zoom chat as well. And finally, before we start, my first thank you is to all the venues who typically host us in Astoria. Many of them are small, and I know that it's been a challenge for food service, bars, and restaurants around the country this year. And we so can't wait to be in Astoria, packed into the Voodoo Room, or filling up the whole Columbia Theater. So thank you for hosting us for so long. And thanks to our attendees for being patient as we do this virtually. So with that, I want to welcome our first performer for the 8 o'clock block. That person is George Wilson. George, come on up. George was born in Scotland and now lives in Portland, Oregon. He's fished the North Sea and Northeast Atlantic. Did that for over 20 years, but he's also did 2 years set netting in Kodiak, which you can read about in this zine, Love George, Letters from Fish Camp. And Joe also has paintings up in Astoria's Imaging Gallery, which you can also be viewed online. So take a moment to do those, but I'm going to leave it to George. Thank you.
Thank you, Elma, for that beautiful introduction. Okay, I'm going to do, it's a short piece called Rocko. We've been inside first with the pandemic. Then we had a curfew because of police riots. Then we had the fires. I've been thinking a lot about my country, about Scotland, and the end of the world and how we got here. I've been thinking about a place called Rockall. I've only fished Rockall once. The Rockall Bank is in the Atlantic. It's 240 miles southwest of the Butt of Lewis, the most northerly part of the Isle of Lewis, which is 40 miles off the west coast of Scotland. So it's 240 miles southwest of that. It's just over a day's steam in our boat, the D side, doing 9 knots. There's a 100-fathom edge, which is 40 miles west of the Hebrides. Boats fish the 100-fathom edge or deeper, but then it just goes deeper and deeper, and then it rises again to become the Rockall Bank. It's way out there. It's a huge bank of relatively shallow water, which rises up from very deep water. Rockall is at the northern edge of it. The fishermen just refer to it as the Rock. It stands 57 feet above the ocean, except in the wintertime when the swells kind of swamp it. But it's a huge lump of granite. I fished out there, but I've only seen it in the distance as we were fishing the deeper waters around the edges of the bank for monkfish and megrim. You can see photographs of it online. It's the last land grab made by the British Empire, when in 1955 they lowered 2 Marines and an ornithologist and raised the British flag and claimed the valuable fishing and mineral rights for the United Kingdom. Scotland is the closest landfall. A 2013 Guardian article by Jason Rodriguez reports that the islet first appeared on maps 400 or so years ago. The name comes from the Scots Gaelic word Rockabara, which is the name of a mythical island that comes and goes 3 times. Its third appearance, the story goes, heralds the end of the world. In 1904, 600 Northern European emigrants bound for New York on the passenger liner Norge perished when their ship struck a reef a few miles from the rock. There were about 100 survivors. Rockall is said to have been mistaken for an iceberg, a sailing ship, a whale, and a submarine. An armed merchant cruiser, thinking it was an enemy vessel, warned it to surrender in the First World War before opening fire. Peter Smith, the man responsible for the introduction, which led eventually to me marrying Mo, moving to the United States, fishing in Alaska, and becoming a fisher poet. Peter Smith used to fish Rockall a lot, and on one summer trip, he sailed close and 2 of his crew swam and scrambled onto the rock. They fished herricks there and cod, used to catch huge cod, just enormous cod, and squid in the summertime. That shallow bit where the rock is, there's a place there where they got a ton of squid. Usually the bigger boats went out there and they just filled up with haddock really quickly. In the heyday of it, in the 80s and 90s, they just went back and forth, filling up. We had a paper boy in the village named Neil Wood, a fine loon, as you say, a good boy. I remember sitting watching the TV and him coming and delivering the papers. He graduated Bucky High in 1992 and went straight to the fishing. Worked for Davy Main on the Aurora. They were fishing Rockall and the weather, it was force 9, sustained winds of 48 to 55 knots with gusts considerably more. Boats were fishing and they were hauling broadside to the weather, and the boat got hit by a wave and Neil was washed over the side. He lost his life and his body was never found. He lost his life at Rockall. This is what I've been thinking about as we've been shut inside from the pandemic and the wildfire smoke and the civil unrest. About a rock in the Atlantic that comes and goes, that makes money for some, but from others demands the highest price. Is the end of the world coming in clouds of wildfire smoke, or in the tear gas, or in a force 9 gale? Thank you. Back to you, Elma. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, George, for kicking us off this 8 o'clock hour. Love having you here every year. And I loved reading Letters from Fish Camp out loud with my crew a couple years ago. Up next from Long Beach, Washington is Jan Bono, who has been a fisher girl, fisher wife, and fisher poet for most of her life. At 2, she was even tied to her boat in case she fell in the water by her father, but she made it through. And in addition to poetry, Jan writes a cozy mystery series set on the Southwest Washington coast. You can learn more about Jan and purchase her work at janbonobooks.com. Welcome, Jan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Elma, and good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Jan Bono from Long Beach, Washington. And back in the 1980s, I was part of the commercial fishing industry by marriage only, but I have maintained a healthy respect for the men and women who make their living out on the ocean. My first of 3 poems is dedicated to Dana McMurrick Monson. She's a former student of mine, and she's the daughter of the subject of this first poem, which takes us back to December 1982, when we lost the Midnight Express off Tillamook Head. It's called Capsized. Their fishing boat had capsized in towering 20-foot seas. The 5-foot life raft tossed about in a vicious, freezing breeze. 2 men had made it to the raft, but they couldn't reach 2 more crew. Another was stranded below the deck, and there was nothing they could do. There'd been no time to don the suits, which would have helped them stay afloat. The trawler rolled fast, and then it sank. No distress signal came from the boat. The waves increased to 40 feet. No point in trying to use the oars. They were headed north on the current along the Washington shore. After 40 hours at the ocean's whim, the raft drifted close to the beach. They could see the lights of the cabins that maybe they could reach. They heard the waves break on the beach, a quarter mile at best. They could sense their time was now, and this was really going to put them to the test. Tumbled over and over in the surf, 3/4 drowned and mouthful of sand, one made the shore and crawled out upon the land. 2 men had struggled in the dark, but only one emerged alone. Somehow broke into a summer place where he used the telephone. "You've made it this far," the dispatcher said, "and I know that you are weak, but flash those inside house lights for the ambulance to seek." His rescuers drove up the beach where his family often played. The thought of his wife and children had kept him from being afraid. When they'd left the port together, the crew had numbered 5, but their fickle ocean mistress let only one come home alive. And the second poem takes us up to Alaska in May 1988, and it's dedicated to Michelle Main Brown, who is also the daughter of the subject of this poem. And it's called God Bless the Captain. They say the day was rather calm when the Golden Venture went down. 3 of the 4 who'd been on board were in the life raft that was found. The fishing vessel that picked them up was the Hazel Lorraine back then. The distress call came from the captain, who was thinking only of his men. The trawler was simply making a turn, like hundreds of times before. Her net was down as she came around, but disaster was in store. She went down near Unasca Island in the Aleutian Island chain. 3 men were saved, and 1 was lost, and the lost was Rodney Main. We know he died a noble death, but what about his wife? How hard it must have been for her to carry on with life. But men who fish for a living can't stay on land for long. The sea will always call them with a beautiful siren song. So God, please bless those fishing vessels wherever they might roam. And God, please do the best you can to bring them safely home. And now a quick nod to my fellow poets. More than 90 of them are here on Zoom this weekend. And I think being here sharing their work is just pretty freaking awesome. This short 4-line poem is called FisherPoets, and it's dedicated to my 2 poetic mentors, Gino Leach and Dave Densmore. You know, if I were to pick 2 better poetic mentors, well, I don't think I could. So this is for them. Those who love the sound of nature, like the lapping of waves against the bows of their boat, they often love putting strings of words together just to see if they will float. So thanks for including me this year. And like Elma said, for more of my fishing poetry or some of my other work, please check out my website, janbonobooks.com. And I hope to see you all in person in Astoria in 2022. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan. Jan, really, some of those poems brought up a hard part of commercial fishing, which are the dangers that Mo also mentioned. And the Oregon coast has had a rough winter, the crab fleet there. So I do want to recognize and honor, share our condolences with the families of those lost on the FB coastal rain, and mention that there are some GoFundMes to support the families who are suffering from a big loss right now. And up next, we're going to keep moving right along. Thank you to Jan and George. And up next is Rich Bard. The rumor is that Rich just goes around in a halibut hoodie he found in a thrift store, posing as fisherman so that he can jump into events like this and foist his preposterous poems and stories on unsuspecting audience is on YouTube and Zoom. But I know that's not quite right, and I look forward to hearing what Rich has to share. Thanks for being here.
Hi. So what I'm going to perform here is a fable, which is among a whole bunch of fables that seem to have been schooling up during this last pandemic here, and they're just about to a book form. So this one's called Cats on Boats. On my first boat, before I'd even thought about fishing in Alaska, we had a cat while we trolled for salmon in Washington. The cat's name was Lesser Yarmouth, and it applied itself to the 7-step self-improvement program that most boat cats take up. There was one step where the cat imagined the tall wooden trolling poles were put there for it to climb, like trees. Almost all the other steps, in one way or another, involved sleeping. We called the cat Lesser Yarmouth because the name Great Yarmouth was already taken. That was the name of the salmon troller we and the cat were fishing on. It was an old boat. There's a photo of it on its first job in Akutan, working as a supply boat for ships that were putting the hurt on the whale population out by the Aleutian Islands. I wondered if the cat's thinking had, like most of the world, evolved to disapproval of whale killing. Look at this, I said to the cat one evening at home during the off-season. The American Pacific Whaling Company, which was the boss of the Great Yarmouth in Akutan, killed and chopped up almost 500 whales there one year. Horrible, huh? The cat didn't respond for quite a while. Then it opened an eye and said, I'm trying to get a nap here. I'll get back to you. But it never did. The American Pacific Whaling Company had a decent run, but times got tough, and the Great Yarmouth was laid off. The American Pacific Whaling Company had a decent run, but times got tough, and the Great Yarmouth was laid off. By the time I came along, many years and several thoughtless owners later, rot and indifferent maintenance had reduced its value to next to nothing. I was glad for this. Next to nothing was exactly what I could afford. The boat came with free health care. In 1798, Congress had passed a law which let sailors go to a marine hospital and get medical help for free. Somehow, 180 years went by without any outrage about freeloaders. Then we had a president who saw freeloaders everywhere he looked. And so Ronald Reagan stopped the outrageous healthcare giveaway. He kicked out the doctors and closed all the hospitals. Sometimes I thought about what Thanksgiving would be like in the Reagan household. The family would be seated around a big table, and a cousin down at the lower end would say, "Would you pass the dark meat?" And Ronald Reagan would say, "Go get a job and buy your own turkey, you freeloader bum." After a few fishing seasons went by, the cat added a step to its self-improvement program. When in port, going down the dock and hiding in hopes of not having to go back out on the ocean. Eventually, my partner adopted the same view of fishing as the cat. One year, she stayed on the beach, and Lesser Yarmouth stayed with her. It was happy to be home in the summer, surrounded by real trees and grass and mice. It had some good years there, but over time, the cat got old and run down and began to stay in bed all day in its pajamas. The happy ending would have been if the cat had met its end in contentment in its comfortable bed by the kitchen stove. We waited for some last words like, "It's time I passed on into the next incarnation. I've had a good life, especially after I got off that darn boat. Bye now, love you." But the cat couldn't get to that point. It just kept looking a little more ragged and unhappy every day. The cat was miserable and needed help dying, but on the island where we lived, there was no vet to give it a shot, and it was hard to think of any other humane way out. Eventually, we decided that the cat might not hold it against us if we put it in a gunny sack with some rocks and into the saltwater bay by the house. It started out all right. The cat didn't object to be put in the sack, and I took it to the bay's rocky edge and dropped it in. Then things went sideways. The water was pretty clear, and 5 feet down, I could see the knot at the sack's end come undone, and the cat came out, moving its legs like crazy, like it was Ali Sheba racing down the home stretch in the 1997 Kentucky Derby. Then the cat stopped running and sank out of sight. It wasn't the greatest image to be left with after a nice long relationship. On the other hand, Ali Sheba did win the Derby that year. That's that fable. And just one more thing here. Here's the hoodie. Bye. Stay healthy. Good fishing.
Thank you, Rich. I know there are some other cats in the fleet. I want to shout out Halcyon, the troller cat from the NERCA. Thanks again. I also want to mention that I've learned that the GoFundMe I mentioned is linked right on the Fisher Poets website. And there you'll also find links to events happening tomorrow. As Mo mentioned in her set, there are a bunch of workshops, and then there are also some gallery openings that are also doing some cool virtual options. I want to thank all the Fisher Poets organizers. Erica is joining us now, and since moving to Oregon has also supported the Fisher Poets organizing. And she was born in Kodiak, fished from all the way from Sitka to Bristol Bay, a bunch of different participation in the fishery from working in the canneries, I think, as well as catching fish. At 25, she went back to school and began a decade of environmental activism and work, which she shares with her family. And I'm really excited to have her here. I saw her make people blush in the voodoo room once, so I look forward to hearing what happens tonight. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome, friend. So I've got 3 short pieces this evening. I'm so thankful that everyone put this on and joined us. I come to you from Astoria, Clatsop Chinook land, and this first one is called Seasons because this is just another season that we're going through. You have good seasons, you have bad seasons, and we'll get through it. Not a fisherman anymore. As I stand and stare out from the shore, I won't go to sea, it's not for me. No, I'm not a fisherman anymore. Instead, I'll raise these babies, even though they occasionally drive me crazy. I'm cleaning the shoreline instead of pulling up ground line. My kisses mend bruises and scrapes of all kinds, quickly like my hands used to strip cork lines. I've learned signs beyond flipping the bird, so I could teach my children the word for water, for food, and for love. See, I want them to know just how far it can go if they care for the sea just like me, for the waters I've sailed on, for the ports that I've hailed from, for the fish on their plates when their dad's running late from towing someone safely to shore. No, I'm not a fisherman anymore. As a mom, I sing songs about packing along plastic bottles, old shoes, and used masks. And I know someday they will ask why I'm not a fisherman anymore. So this one is dedicated to all the dynamic duos on the back deck. You know, that deckhand that you find and you just get a groove. This was published in the first edition of the Young Fisherman's Almanac. I didn't know it was published until my dear friend sent me a text message saying, hey, someone just walked into the coffee shop with a picture of me in my wedding dress in a bathroom stall. And I said, I thought I got permission. So it says, find yourself a good deckhand and stick with her. Rachel fished with me in Bristol Bay for 3 seasons, 1 on the FV Silverado, effectively a floating beer can with a lot of holes, and 2 on the FV Stargazer. We knew each other's mannerisms well enough to predict when the other would sneeze, or in my case, puke, while picking fish, and would grab a salmon from the other if we could see the problem in a fish basket while the opposite side of the net. We fished during the 32-cent base price for red season and the 80-cent years following, and we fished together in the years of snail mail when the bag phone was the only option and cost $1 a minute. In the season, she chose a different kind of work. She'd send weekly letters and a couple care packages full of newspapers and magazines, knowing the connection to the outside world that I was most definitely craving. We'd also take on tasks that the other hated. For her, pulling the anchor. For me, climbing down into the fish hold after a delivery to retrieve salmon that missed the brailer bag. Having someone on deck next to you that's willing to swap scut work is priceless. But be careful, because you may end up in a bathroom stall many years down the road, finding yourself digging and holding up layer after layer of petticoats and tulle while someone uses the head. As I said, I'm coming to you from Astoria, and it has taken me a long time to get here. I first came here in 2003 during my first year ever living away from the ocean. I was doing my undergraduate at Southern Oregon University, and I came here and it reminded me of like the dirty, gritty Cannery Row of Kodiak. And then I came to Fisher Poets in like 2006. And I said, oh yeah, this is for me. And I've been trying to make my way back here for a long time since. My partner Daniel is in the Coast Guard, and we've been together for about 21 years on and off. And Astoria has been on our bucket list. And we call this his Twilight Tour because he's at 22 years in the Coast Guard now. And we finally made it to Astoria. And I figured my ode to Astoria, I could sing it to you tonight because we're all missing each other and we wish we were here in Astoria. And hopefully next year we will all be together. I've been singing this song in the woods with my kids for about 6 months, but it's a little too late for my 6-year-old to stay up. So it's just me tonight. Oh, Astoria, I'm coming home to you. Oh, Astoria, I am trying to get to you. Want to stand on the river where the water meets the blue. Oh, Astoria, I am coming home to you. Oh, Astoria, I want to get to you. Oh, Astoria, I am trying to see it through. I'm trying to walk by the river where the ship's horns blew. Oh, Astoria, I am coming home to you. Oh, Astoria, I have finally got to you. Now I live where the river meets the blue. Made my home right here on the sunny South Slope. Oh, Astoria, I am never leaving you. I'm sending you all love from Astoria. I can't wait to see you in person next year.
Love it, Erica. Thanks for singing. Thanks for speaking so well to the realities of being a Fisher mom. Shout out to the Fisher moms. I'm pulling a mobile stern and dipping my computer. And next, I want to welcome John Palms. John is leading a workshop tomorrow. Like I said, more information about that on the Fisher Poets website. There's a little tab to the left. Check it out, see what's going on. There's also movies to watch. But anyway, John fished as a hand troller around Elfin Cove near Glacier Bay National Park up in Alaska. He has written many songs, saying he often channels Elvis Presley and sang along with his V8 Ford engine about whatever was going on around him. And these days gets a lot of inspiration from the FisherPoets Gathering itself. So join John, write some songs tomorrow, but here's a little taste. Thanks for being here, John.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody. Wow. I just feel so humble I'm just so glad that you accept me as one of the Fisher Poets, because really you're so good and you're so clever and you're all so authentic. And so much thanks to Rich King for doing that Smitty poem, Rubber Hooks Divine. That just, to me, that's what it's all about. I hope we're all sharing each other's stuff for years after we're all gone. So this first tune is inspired by Fisher Poets. A few years ago, there was a presentation on the fishing in the New Testament. And, 4 of the 12 apostles were fishermen. And I thought, wow, that's something to think about. Why are we using this fish and fishing metaphor? And why is it so appropriate to this new religion? Joseph was a carpenter, but Jesus was a fisherman, the first of his disciples too. No accident at all. Out on the ocean, all men are brothers. Jesus was a fisherman, no accident at all. He said, launch out into the deep. Put down your nets, and they said, we've been fishing all night long and we ain't caught nothing yet. But when the seine was pursed and brailing was complete, they plugged every fish boat on the Sea of Galilee. When it was time to feed the multitudes that listened to him speak, Jesus knew just what to do. It was no accident at all. Yes, he knew just what to do. When there were thousands to be fed, he multiplied the humpies and the pilot bread. Now when some folks talk of heaven, they point up to the sky, but the ocean is the closest thing you'll see until you die. No beginning and no end, she always will provide, unforgiving of greed and pride. It was no accident that Jesus was a fisherman, the first of his disciples too. No accident at all. Out on the ocean, all men are brothers. Jesus was a fisherman, no accident at all. You know, one thing I was thinking about when I was trying to think of verses for the song, I was thinking, Jesus, get back in the boat. I couldn't let that pass. So this next tune is written, I was listening to a 371, I think it was, engine that was running that boat, and we were coming from Ketchikan past Lincoln Rock. It's about Lincoln Rock on the way to Myers Chuck. Spent a lot of time by myself, far away, far away, far away across the beautiful ocean. Am I bound to sail all alone, far away across the beautiful sea? Like a moth to a flame, like a moth to a flame, I was drawn to your love in the night, like a dream. Far away, far away, far away across the beautiful ocean. Am I bound to sail all alone, far away across the beautiful sea? Like a bird in a storm, I was tired and searching for shelter. I found more in your arms. Now you're gone, far away, far away, far away across the beautiful ocean. Am I bound to sail all alone, far away across the beautiful sea? Far away across the beautiful sea. You can download all these things free on johnpalms.nervous. Okay, bye.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Two beautiful ones. Again, John has a workshop tomorrow. You can go jam with him. And for those of you who don't know, this is not, or who haven't been yet to Astoria, this is not quite how Fisher Poets typically works. Typically, you have to pick and choose who you get to see. So we are really blessed to be able to see everybody over these 3 days. And if you are just joining us, there is another set tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. But for now, it's really an honor and a treat to introduce my good friend, Maggie Bursch. Maggie is calling in from Washington tonight, but she grew up set netting on the Ugashik River in Bristol Bay, and now she runs her own drift gill netter up there, the FE Georgette Rose. She's in occupational therapy school and has written many a fisher poetry at her young age, given her lifelong fishing career, including this beautiful little zine called Broken Water. I heard it's limited edition, but maybe you can get your hands on it. Thanks for being here, Maggie. Look forward to hearing you.
Hi. So good to be here in this community tonight. I just can't say how much it means to me to hear all your voices right now and just know you guys are all out there and thinking about the water. And yeah, I just really feel fortunate to be a part of this tonight. This poem I'm going to read is called a sestina. The type of poem is a sestina, and the poem is called From Water. We differ, my friend and I, in what we look for in a boat. He wants performance, and I want a bunk for the nanny. He wants jets and step, and I want refrigerated seawater. We do not differ in what we fear, because we both fear failing. He does not tell me this, but I see it in his shoulders. Along with failure, I fear compromise. Is that what it means to be a woman? Compromise? Even a woman with her own boat, even a woman tougher than the sea who wears men's clothes because of big shoulders. My mother was a woman like that, and I had a nanny. I don't believe that meant she was failing, but as a child, I had a fantasy my mother was water, that I was born from the water, that I was raised on pirate ships and made no compromise. I'd pretend I sailed those ships through storms so big the masts were failing. Then I would hear her call. Then I would hear the call of my nanny and jump off into the grass, my jacket slung over my shoulder. Now some days I feel the weight of a gender on my shoulders when I am one of the only women on the water, and because in the winter I put away my boat to be a nanny. My pride is tied up in the hall without a lot of room for compromise. My pride is tangled into every line on that boat, and I lie in bed thinking of what hydraulic hose is closest to failing. I look to the women before me who face the fear of failing. And if I know anything, it is because I stand on their shoulders. I have listened to their legends or secrets or worked on their boat. Women who are mothers and have broken the water, who carry anchors and car seats and sharp knives and compromise. Do you give up the helm, bring the baby along, get a nanny? So here I am looking for a boat with a bunk for the nanny, banking on a few more years without my birth control failing, bracing for the day I will face compromise like a wet wind, the day I will carry someone else on my shoulders as we head to the water or to the boat. My friend crawls into the forecastle and I tell him that bunk is too small for his shoulders. He says it's got a good engine and it's worth the compromise. I think of his mother, who gave up the sea to create him, to raise him from water. Thank you. I'm just gonna read one more that is kind of, there's like comfort foods, and I feel like this to me is a comfort poem. And it's about my parents. Round, soft flannel movement, slow. Old memories like bones buried in boxes made into shelves. One round wood room, two old fishermen, still lovers, round in the way they are soft, soft flannel movement, barely letting the waterfowl in through the windows, soft bones, round glass, found on open beaches where the skies howl, soft moans, old whispers. In the vowels of the tree songs, there are secrets their ears know, secrets only old bones know, backs broken by wind, hands hollowed by weight, souls torn by weather. Ode to hold me, ode to old fishermen lying on flannel, holding each other, holding memories, holding stones. Thank you guys so much. It's been such a big honor, and I love you all. Can't wait to see you next year and have a beer.
Yes.
Maybe.
Thank you, Maggie. We have over 300 people zooming in on YouTube, and I just want to thank all the organizations that have helped us get the word out about Fisher Poets in the past, particularly KMUN, Coast Community, and the Astorian, and the Coast weekend as well. Another outfit change. Shout out to everybody who fed us this year during a really tough pandemic, fishermen included, but also all the Washington fruit pickers. Okay, we have Gino Leach, who has a little background noise. Gino, you got to tell the room to be quiet while you perform. And Gino's coming in from Chinook, Washington. He has done drag fishing out of Astoria and performed with Fisher Poets since 1995. Is that right? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm up here at Rob and Tiffany Sides' place. They just moved up place overlooking the bridge span on the Astoria Bridge. Yeah, they're in Bond Street Heights up here, so it's a pretty nice place. Anyway, this one goes back to about 78, 79. I wrote it, not then, but anyway, it's kind of the time period is when you couldn't just go out there and hard nose it sometime. Well, anyway, it's called The Pink Orange Glow. Well, she idled across a breaking bar, casting a sodium glow. The lump was 10 to 14 feet with an occasional buffalo. The crew were wedged in heaving bunks. Grime pillows drank their drool. The clammy quilts were a patchwork stink of bait and brine and fuel. Well, the skipper's wash-rock fissured face glowed green in the dashboard lights. He'd passed more lighthouses and telephone poles. He was a hard case, stick and stay guy. He slurped scalded fishboat Folgers from a varicose vein white mug. Zippoed his umpteenth Kenmore, kept an eye on an inbound tug. They found a hole in the lump and throttled up a howling 6-1-10. The boat gave a buck. She banged, she rolled, and shipped green water again. He ran offshore, sniffed out his string, painted Norwegian green and gloss white, and foaming black seas, buoys, danced, dove, and teased in the pink-orange glow of the sodium lights. The grogged, cow-lit crew rolled out of the bunks. The boat wallowed deep in the trough. Silent, sullen, they pulled on dank boots and questioned the lives they had wrought. Drunk with sleep on a rolling back deck, their lungs dragged in diesel exhaust, shining like seals in moss green Hermansens. They meat-axed crab bait and swung out the block. Well, the skipper climbed the rust-blistered starboard ladder, took the helm on a flying bridge. Disc bulged and burned in his lower back, cigarette drowning his lips. Rain shotgunned the greased yellow hood of his uniroyal jacket. The rigging started to sing. It was a southerly moan. The hydraulics droned. He lined the boat up on a string. Well, on the back deck, sea-sprayed night shadows. The block man dug his gut in a rubber wrap rail. He hooked a diving trailer buoy as he leaned in the teeth of the gale. He fired a bamboo buoy stick back on deck with blue glove soup bone fist and horsed a fathom of slack and taut yellow crab line with a gunny sack back and wrought iron wrists. The crab block shiv raced like a meat slicer, snatched the line from his hands. The sea boiled white around his black red ball boots. He put the snooze to the block and lifted the ram. The skipper throttled up, exhaust belched black from the stack. The hydraulics howled and the decks was awash. And breaking the surface from 45 fathom, the lid straps bulged on a Dungeness pot. Well, their crew wore splitting mauled grins as they landed the pot. The boat heaved, she rolled, she pitched, and she tossed. They sorted and baited, let her go on a roll. They had one down and 500 to go. And they danced on a string in the pink-orange glow. Thank you.
Amazing as always, Gino. Thank you. Thanks to the sites for making that happen. It's great
All
to
right.
glad you're all together. Okay. Up next, pretty exciting. We have Greenhorn in the room. This is Tony's first Fisher Poets Gathering. I know she's looking forward to making the trek up to Oregon, hopefully in 2022 now. Tony grew up in a Croatian-American fishing family up near me in Everett, Washington. And the family boat was the Western Maid, a 76-foot purse seiner. She's the author of 6 books of poetry and prose. A new book, Spellhaven, is forthcoming from Counterpoint Press, so look out for that. If we were really in Astoria, I would make the room cheer the whole time till Tony made it to the mic. So I would love to see some exclamation points in the chat welcoming our first time reader, Tony. Thanks for being here.
Well, you have made it so nice. So thank you so much, Elma. You know, my wife and I love Astoria. We go up there a lot. And we were up there a couple of years ago, and we were having coffee at the Coffee Girl down in that cannery down the way, down the railroad track. And we walked through the cannery pier and that cannery, and there was a guy that I started talking to who was selling fish, and he started to talk to me about the Fisher Poets. And I talked to him about fishing history and family, and he said, you know, you should come on up. So I got in contact with a man named John Broderick, who has been so lovely. And so he invited me and Amanda and Elma, thank you for all of that, for making me welcome. So my father's boat, the Western Maid, it was dredged up out of Coos Bay in 2017. So it's had its last voyage. But growing up, my father fished up in Dutch Harbor in the Bering Sea and outside of the Northwest waters. And he would bring home prizes like, you know, the glass floats, or sometimes a walrus tusk. But he also brought home fish, right? Lots of fish. So I'm going to read about another type of prize he brought home. I have a book a few years back called Pink Harvest. It has a picture of the shrimp fishing that it's hard to see, I know. But the piece is called The Prize Inside. Get a fish, snapper or lingcod, mackerel or halibut, an everyday fish,
a regular fish, not a special fish, not albacore or swordfish or salmon, too fancy for this common dish. Put the fish in a soup pot, cover it with water, let it come to a slow boil, like your mother's slow boil, as she waits for your father's fishing boat to come in, for his ship to come in, for him to make good on his promise to fix the leaky gutters this time he's in port. Cook until the juices of the fishes are released, then simmer. The simmering goes on for minutes or hours or days, for weeks or months or years. Fish is simmering on the stove forever, from cradle to grave. The fish simmers, and at some point is done. Lift the fish out to place it on a platter. As you lift, the meat falls away from the bones, millions of bones, the ribs, the spine, the long bones, the short, the flat bones, the small bones around the cheeks like lacework, the intricate system of delicate, delicate bones. And now the need to pray to Saint Blaise, patron saint of things caught down the wrong pipe. And now the need to go to church and have the priest draw 2 white candles across your neck and bless your throat so the bones won't get caught and choke you to death. And once blessed, tell me, your mother will say, how can you swear like you do, like your father swears? How can you say, yabem, fuck? So easily that foul language rolls off your tongue. What remains in the pot is fish stock, golden broth that can cure all, a sore throat, a sore life, a salty cure. Now add potatoes, cubed, or rice and peas like the Italians, reezy beezy, that's what you say, and simmer until the rice is cooked up and puffed up and the air smells salt sweet, perfumed by the sea. Place the platter on the dinner table, on display. You listen with your sisters on either side while your father talks about all the other slabs, about the lack of money, the lack of fish, about who's getting screwed, yabem, yabem, yabem. Hear your mother slip in something about the weather, the forecast for rain, the gutter. See your father gaze out the window at the horizon, just outside, calling him, though he's only been in port 1 day. Today in school, you learned about Christopher Columbus. Did he too have the same look standing at the helm on the lookout for the new world? You play around with what's left on your meal. Why does it take them so long to eat? And finish everything on your plate, she'll say, and then you sit. And then you wait. On the platter, all that's left are the bones. The backbone, like the one you see in the cartoons, where the cartoon cat tips over the trash can in the alley and pulls out the fish spine with only the head and the tail intact. Here, there's no escaping the face, the open mouth, the eye looking upward toward heaven or the ceiling light. It was living and now it's dead, and you focus in on the white eye, like the pupilless eyes of the zombies you saw in the science fiction film, The Night of the Living Dead. Zombies who looked just like regular townspeople the day before. The mailman, the neighbor, the school nurse. Then the next day, they were walking with their arms stretched out in front of them, coming to claim you, coming your way. You look at the eye, covet it, think to yourself, it's not a crime what's about to happen next. The fish no longer uses his eyes to evade the net, the hook, to see whatever it is a fish sees. The fish is blind to what will happen next, the soul already gone, as we are blind to what will happen tomorrow and the next day and the next, blind to what lies just around the bend. And now begins the arguing, the fight every time, who gets the prize and who got it last, and you always get your way and you're a lying cheat. For the fish only has 2 eyes and there are 3 daughters, and someone will be left out. Someone always gets left out. But tonight I'm the lucky one. Tonight I get an eye. When I put the eye in my mouth, it tastes salty and fishy and good. And when I chew it, it's a little chalky. Remember, she says, don't tell your friends at school about the eyes. I chew and chew. It's not the taste I covet. It's the prize inside the eye, inside where we cannot see. When the white is gone, there it is, the clear, round center, as tiny as a small glass bead. If you hold it up and look closely, it's like looking inside a clear globe, And there you'll see a sea and sky, and there I spy a boat, and there a sea full of fish. And in this world, the sea is always calm, and the sky is always clear. And if I could vault to this life, into the world inside the eye, my vision would expand. I could see into the future. I could see beyond the kitchen table, beyond the house, to the world past this life. And what's that out there, Captain? Just around the bend. And what's that out there, Captain? Just beyond the horizon's edge. Thank you.
Well, Tony, I think I speak on behalf of all the Fisher Poets that we would be thrilled to welcome you back. No greenhorn at all. That was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Great job, Tom Hilton, on recruiting somebody new. I'm super blessed to have a bunch of visual artists as well in my set tonight. One of those is our next performer, Duncan Berry from Otis, Oregon, who makes prints from creatures of the land, sea, and air from where he lives in the UN Cascade Biosphere Reserve. Sorry, that's a little bit of a handful for my mouth at this hour.
Okay.
But Duncan, we're so glad to have you. And if you want to check out some of his art, you can do that at the Riversea Gallery in Astoria. They also have a little bit of an online option this year. Duncan grew up on his family's trawler out of the Columbia River, and then went on to found a series of companies at the intersection of business and the environmental movement. And as I said, he lives now near the mouth of the Salmon River on the Central Oregon coast. So Duncan, you have the mic. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for the great show, and thanks for being our illustrious MC tonight. I love your costume changes. So, you know, all of us that live here at the coast in this dark winter look forward to this ray of sunshine that is the FisherPoets Gathering, especially this winter with ice and snow and the winds over the last 24 hours. It's just, it just lifts our spirits. I'm going to spend my 5 minutes talking about 2 seasons on the ocean. One, a poem about the winter actually about the summer, and a sea shanty, a little more rollicking one on wintertime and the crab season that we're having right now. So the poem first. So every single one of us that fishes depends upon the upwelling and what it brings us, the gifts it gives us. And so that upwelling, for those of you that don't live here, is an incredible north wind that blows, starts up in June, blows trillions of gallons of water south. And just like your toilet bowl, all those waters move outwards into the Pacific, and they act like this giant pump, and they pull this deep, nutrient-rich water in close to shore. And when they hit the shore, boom, they burst into life, and all hell breaks loose. So this poem is about that upwelling, and it's also dedicated to the flexibility and resilience of all my fellow human beings during this radical time of change we're all going through. So here's upwelling. North wind blowing cold and hard there on the dull gray horizon under the fog bank. The surface of the sea torn and pushed away from its anchoring shore. Deep waters stirring, pulled upwards out of the dark, bearing all that is drifted down from above. Rich broth of all that remains of the once vibrant life of the sea, bull kelp and gray whale, cormorant, all falling to their place of rest during winter. Rising up now, pulled to the surface by summer winds, gathered remains of the past, transformed and fueling the greatest flagrant buffet table feeding frenzy on the planet. Fueling the explosion of phytoplankton so vast they can be seen from space, they gather into a great green fire raging on the surface of the sea. Zooplankton rising out of their sandy beds, eaten by the eulachon and sand lance and herring, eaten by salmon and albacore, eaten by the ever-hungry alpha predator human. And here, inside of me, this compost of past pain, joys, secrets, forgotten impulses, all falling like a soft rain into my depths. As in me, All that has seemingly died or was lost is rising up, feeding this tide of change, these unfolding, unbidden shifts in me. What was, becoming what is. These winds and currents of my unsettled and fresh new life upwelling. So that's my serious few moments. And now I'm going to turn to a shanty. Whenever I do so, I need to do a little costume change, though. This one goes out to Mike Shirley, who is our dock master at Fish People Seafood out in Ilwaco, and is also to all the crab boats that bring us their incredible crab or their dungees each year. And so most of you know about octopus, yeah? But not many of you probably know they're of, man, this is hard to get on when you're sitting down. So most of you don't know that they're of the mollusk family. Yeah, clams. So if you've ever crabbed, you know that a crab's favorite meal is a razor clam, and has been for millions of years. Well, this is a story of one of those clams that dropped its shell, grew legs, and had revenge on its mind. For in a simple twist of fate, an octopus's favorite meal is a Dungeness crab. So if you feel like singing along, please do. This one's about Metacarcinus magister. It's called the Ballad of Dungy Boy. Well, Metacarcinus magister is a samurai of the sea, armored up with 10 strong legs and just as proud as he can be. Well, Mr. Dungy Boy, you finally met your match. But there's a big old 8-legged octopus gonna wolf you down his hatch. Gonna wolf you down his hatch. Well, we're working a line of parts along the 20-fathom line, searching for our double boys and that sodium vapor shine. God has a sense of humor, that much is crystal clear. For why would he make crabs fill out at the worst time of the year? Lines are spinning in the block, pots swaying to and fro. Here's 20 more crusty boys and down the chute they go. Swells are coming in high as a house, wind screaming in our ears. When suddenly the pots come up empty, feeding the worst of our fears. Hey, someone's beat us to the punch, boys, taking no prisoners and leaving no trace. I bet it's one of them 8-leggeds down below with a big smile on his face. Well, 4 pots later, up he finally comes, our creepy, crawly, bright red octopus Jinx. He lets out one hell of a crabby burp, and he looks me straight in the eye and winks. Looks me straight in the eye and winks. Well, word up on the street about you, Octo. Word of your Squidward, Tentacool, and Octoraptor fame. Humans in their boats playing the El Pulpo Apocalypus Kraken game. Sticks and stones, they can't break your bones. Psycho, Mantis, Squicken, Octobroaster, Crabtopus, Inky Pete, Flumpy, Dumpster, no. Because Mr. Dungy Boy, you have finally met your match. But there's a big old 8-legged octopus gonna wolf you down his hatch. Gonna wolf you down his hatch. Thank you, fellow Fisher Poets. And look forward to seeing you in Astoria in the flesh and wearing our skins.
Nice costume change, Duncan.
Yeah.
You're pretty good at that. I am wearing Amber Webb. I also have her Sedna print up here behind me. And this is by Oceana Willis. I don't want to leave that out. But first, I am really excited, or first, second, whatever, here we are, round and about 9 o'clock. I'm very excited to welcome my friend Tella, another Bellingham fisher gal. Tella is a lifelong salmon troller based out of Sitka, Alaska. She's fished the FV Nurka with her partner Joel since 2006 and self-markets their catch from here in Washington with Nurka sea frozen salmon. So Tella, as always, I'm just glad to see your smiling face even through the screen, and thank you so much for sharing.
All right. Thanks, Elma. I'm just going to jump right into it, buddies. This is a story from last August, and it's called Dog Days. Jonathan's voice breaks through the deck speaker. You there, Greg? You have time for a story? Our code group is in the late afternoon doldrums of a skinny salmon season. 12 hours in, trying to keep our eyes open for another few, hoping for a night bite. Greg's just made a cup of tea. He has time. Okay, it's a sad story, but it's a good one. Jonathan hasn't been on the radio much today. He sounded distracted, not on the fish like he usually is. Now we learn he's been on the satellite phone with his wife. Laura had to put their dog down today. In person, we might circle grief with clumsy comfort, but radio talk is an accepted monologue for as long as the speaker keys the mic. You don't need to know what to say. You just listen. 5 days into a king trip weary, Jonathan free-ranges memory. He recalls the trip to the pound a few years into their marriage. He was skeptical. We're not going to find anything here. It's all old, barky, broken down dogs. But then, hang on, look at that one. The young Weimaraner pointer mix had good bones and soft ears, and she looked them in the eye. They were back for her the next day. Bensie grew into a family dog with their daughters' births. She was Laura's companion when Jonathan was fishing, and his running partner when he was home. That was a tell of her slow decline. After years leaping for the door at seeing jogging clothes, elder Bensie glanced up, but stayed down. They had known the end was coming. Still, our friend wonders, how do you really know it's time to make that final call and send these family members across the Rainbow Bridge? 16-year-old Bensie told them the time was now. In the August King opening, with Jonathan 900 miles from home off the Southeast Alaska coast, Laura and the girls said his goodbyes with their own. Jonathan thanks Greg for listening. I feel better getting to tell you about her. I know you've been there too. And now it's Greg's turn. Georgie lived with Father Nicholas until deciding he'd rather be across the street with Greg and Amy. When Georgie's legs gave out, they wheelbarrowed him through the neighborhood so everyone could send him off. Joel and I exchanged crumpled looks. We put Bear the boat cat down in Sitka 2 years ago. We ran aimlessly offshore after, away from the fleet and the fish. Our grief cruise, we called that lost day. Listening to our friends' disembodied voices soft as morning doves, Joel shakes his head. I love this group. This group is easy to love. A trio steady as our small boats. The relief of people you can be human with heightens. How rare that feels these days. As the looming election further fractures a pandemic-isolated land world, the peace we have out here is as sacred as the uncomplicated, unconditional love of a good dog. 5 hours from now, a gale will rip through the harbor. We'll be up all night on anchor watch. It'll be the worst night of our season, the one we refer back to as a marker of doubt in the cost-benefit analysis of commercial fishing, inspiring one of our group to later say, I'm going to have a stiff drink and consider my life choices. But we're not there yet. For now, the ocean is calm with a few fish yet to catch, and 2 gentle men casting lines of kinship and compassion. When the sun finally sinks, pink and gold echo their eulogies. We watch the day pass. to Bensie, we say, and to Georgie and Bear and all the beloved creatures who teach us how to be human, and that a sad story may also be a good one. I want to thank Jonathan and Laura for giving this story their blessing. And I want to thank you for all of you being here and with us. And we miss you. And I hope that you have had a source of comfort to carry you through this last year, whether it is one like that or whatever suits you. And we love you, and we'll see you next year in Astoria. Thanks, Alma.
Bye.
Yes. Oh, so good to honor all creatures that are part of this life with us. I also want to just take a moment to thank the performers that make this possible. It is, as Mo said during her set, a little tricky to commit to being on Zoom like this, or even to it's kind of scary to read in Astoria too. So good job everybody for doing that. We have some lifers in here, but some new folks, and I just we organized a Fisher Poets on Bellingham Bay up here, thanks largely to Buck Malloy and the Sea Feast team. And it just means a lot to have all of you sign up and jump in this with us. So thank you so much. Our next performer is Philip, who has worked in marine mechanics as an electrician. He also sang in Southeast Alaska in the late 80s and gillnet for salmon in Norton Sound.
Actually, herring.
Herring, yeah, I wrote salmon and I was like, that's wrong. In 1993, he's calling in from Seattle tonight.
Yeah, well, greetings everyone, and to all you people out there watching on YouTube, come down next year and join us at the FisherPoets Gathering in Astoria. It is a great party. I look forward especially to breakfast and party conversations in the Riverwalk Lounge. Three short slice of fishing poems. First one, and my favorites. Dead humpies rotting in the bilge, and the batteries stinking, and the weather dirty, and the antidote. I don't get seasick, just luck of the draw, but that time running south out of Chatham Straits in dirty weather, and the skipper had me filling the batteries in the sweltering engine room, and the smells of battery acid and leaking diesel fumes and hot oil, and of the 2 dead humpies we later washed out of the bilge under the engine. I was getting a bit lightheaded. But then it was time to sack out up there with my head next to the knee in my forecastle lower bunk, and the bow slamming up and down an easy 10 feet, and I had started out queasy. But we all know how to deal with these things. Just thinking about my then girlfriend, lecherous male lizard brain even gets a hint of procreation, even from cerebral cortex fantasies, and it yells to that queasy stomach, priority, priority, go back to sleep. But you all, being fisher persons, know how that is. Amorous thoughts quell queasiness. Number 2, kids go missing. A deep bay on the outside of Doll Island, mossy cliffs, rocks, barnacles big as baseballs, mussels 7 inches long. We're waiting for an opening, which is where and when Fish and Game says we can put nets in the water. Such interstices hold micro-seiner vacations. A few teens from other seiners go exploring in a rubber raft with a small outboard. I snorkel for abalone. Evening comes. They don't come back. Our boat doesn't join in the search. We watch a long line of lights sweeping off the shore. It's the next morning, We're anchored near the south side. There is a cave mouth just about right in front of us. Out of it comes the rubber raft, the three young guys rowing. Our skipper radios the other boats. The kids explain. We went in to explore. A wave tipped the raft. The motor sank. It was too rough to get out. They spent the night on a sandy shelf. One kid's uncle might have been Fred. Radios. Thank God he's safe. I'm going to kill him. And the last one, if I can get these pages separated, yes. Herring fishing, Cape Danby, Norton Sound, and ice. The natives were all lining up and laughing at my brother David out chopping at ice floes surrounding his boat. The floes surrounded all the boats. David chopping at ice with a hatchet. Hell, even I thought it was funny. The chunks of ice blown in by a west wind, the smallish chunks around the boats, small enough to drift without grounding into the shallows where we anchored. And then, if you let the twin cameras hooked to your bicameral brain or here to your imagination pan backwards in time so you're looking out beyond the beach of this west-facing cove with its 100 stranded fishermen, mostly natives, beyond the small ice and the boats is a higher wall of bergs whose keels hang up on the shelf and thus can't make it into shallower waters. Huge ice, all wind compacted against this shore, a mile of impassable crags before open water, and my brother hitting at it with a hatchet. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say it is quite a treat to see in everyone's Zoom room. It looks like you have a really fun, interesting shop back there, Philip. Thank you for those. Well, I'm super excited to welcome Katie Bursch. Katie gave me a job a couple of years ago, and it's been a real treat learning from her and her family in Bristol Bay. We have a mother-daughter duo. Katie's following Maggie a couple sets later tonight, so that's pretty fun for the Ugashik folks in the room. And Katie got her first fishing job in 1983 after walking the docks in Kodiak. She loaded up a boat with halibut that year, and since then has mostly been set netting in Bristol Bay. Tonight, she's going to do a little mixed media, share some of the commercial fishing themed art that she's been making. You might have seen it already on the FisherPoets website. A lot of the headers there are Katie's dioramas that are featured in Homer this winter. She's going to show us some and share some writing as well. So thanks, Kate. Great to see you.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, here's one of my little pieces I have here. It's in an extra tough box. Guys, these are the kind of boots we get when we fish in Alaska mostly. And so I just find these boxes and I make little scenes and stuff. This one is about being a crew member. And it's kind of like once you die, if you get to come back to Earth, what are you going to do? So this box is about kind of all the earthly pains and injuries we get as fishermen. And this little fisherman has a fish pick and a little brace on its wrist because maybe they have some tendonitis and maybe the scale hit their head. They have a bandage here and there's a little Vicky here on the belt. So we'll put this crew member in this box. This box has lots of things that remind me of all the pains and injuries that come over the years. But if we die, we might want to come back and we might miss things about fishing. So that's what this poem's about. Will I miss the clench of muscle and blood, the twitch and twist of tails? Life on deck, the promise of travail. I didn't respect the Vicky. My thumb, it has a slice. How will I pick those fish, I think, as it throbs throughout the night. My feet, they live in rubber. No skipper shoes for us. Fat chance, fair toes, to mold you go, past the Decinex. But we'd miss the clench of muscle and blood, the twitch and twist of tails. Life, life, life on deck, the promise of travail. My vertebrae are screaming, and I don't know what to do. I won't say nothing to the skipper, because he'll just get another crew. My hands go numb from elbows down, keep me from my sleep. Buck up, get tough, keep moving fast. It's only 2 more weeks. Yet I'll miss the clench of muscle and blood, the twitch and twist of tails. Life, life, life on deck, the promise of travail. We'll put this little guy to bed for the night. And the next one is in a fish box with styrofoam, kind of like you'd send your family some fish. And in here we have a little drift boat I made from a cork. And my crew member, Jacob Easton, made these cool little fish skeletons on his 3D printer. And then we got a fisherman down here. And I sewed up some bibs for that fisherman. And this one is called Flounder Zone. Got to turn my page. Got to get down here. For this one, getting down. Flounder Zone. The barrier between the atmosphere and the brine. Well, we know this interface. Pulling through it our prey, our profit, we raise fish to their deaths. Yea, by mishap, one of ours slips, falls into that world of wet. We rub our eyes with trying to see beneath the veil, where flatfish flourish and amphipods stretch their fetal curve. Our hulls hiss with passing silt as we search. Relentlessly, the tide sucks brown water down this broad bay, broken by bars. Thank you so much, everyone. It's great to see you all and looking forward to Astoria.
Katie, thank you so much. I really do welcome everybody to check out the Bunnell Street Art Center website in Homer. You can see many more of Kate's fishing dioramas. I used to fish in the Ninilchik with right near John Broderick and his family. And when I switched to Ugashik, I was nervous and really sad that I was going to miss perhaps music night. But when I had Katie on the phone in February talking about switching rivers in Bristol Bay, she's like, oh yeah, we do poetry night when it's slow. And I was like, I'm going to make it. So anyway, thanks Kate for sharing. Up next, we have a duo performing together in on the Kenai somewhere. I'm not sure which home they're in, but Steve Schoonmaker and Clark Whitney are going to do their set together. So we've got a 10-minute block here or so. Steve is an Alaska fisherman of 39 years and a fisher poet of 13. I have seen him really rip up the dance floor at Kala before, so excited to have him back. And Clark has fished 20 seasons as a drift gill netter in Bristol Bay. He lives on the Kenai and still fishes off and on in Cook Inlet as a crew member for both drift and set. So thank you both. Glad to see you. Take it away.
Thanks, Elmo. You look quite lovely tonight. And the little screen I see. Well, this piece I just wrote, this is dedicated to a deceased mentor of mine. And I'm going to read this piece. It's called Big Will. In memory of Will and Margie Tillion. Not so much measured in money or gradations, degrees, more like satisfied answers to what's been asked in the breeze, to what's been asking myself, yes, my real properties in my muscular youth of the 1980s. Land's End met Fresh Bay in its postcard of peaks when its harbor was still small, mostly still small boat fleet. Yes, and I was a young man of such simple means, as I sensed from inside with this fisherman in me. Back when the beach fires were frequent, with all the hippies around, with all the driftwood housed spit rats, before the icicle plant burned down. Yeah, but that's another story. I'm just describing those scenes of such simple means, when life was my living room, when my life was a dream. I drove off the trusty Tusty, our mighty state ferry, with my brown Chevy pickup, a 1958 Apache, up the Compass Rose from Kodiak with this fisherman and me. Guess I drove into Homer at the request of the stars, and I parked at the bar quite conspicuously, so an old friend might see that I was at Alice's with this fisherman and me. That's when Janet came in, because she just happened to see my old 58 pickup as she came down the street. And there at Togiak St. Job, she landed for me. And returning to Homer, their skiff man to be with Janet and Elray on the moccasin team. Steel 32, maybe 9 foot in beam. Everything then of such simple means, reflected in bays so wild mountain green. Seen in Kamishak, seen in Ketchimak, yeah, that was the scene. It was hand-pursed in snag skiffs, cassette tapes in those days, when deck speakers spoke George Thorogood to our grinding away, saying, move it on over to the bays stormy clean, to the seabirds and the brown bears where the beaches meet streams, saying with the squeal of the seine winch to our money bags lean, flopping and splashing to the gulls eagerly. That's when I met Big Will, in that time like a dream, an old friend of Elray's who introduced him to me, somewhere around July 1983. Will Tillion of the Halibut Cove clan was a strong, always kindly, often seldom seen man who wore quietly his obvious intelligence under wire-rimmed glasses, cap, and slightly long brown hair. Probably in his old wool halibut jacket, sleeves cut off just above the oversized forearms and hands. Will standing broadly in big rubber boots. When Big Will chuckled, I saw a fisherman, classic with no chrome. Will took me on crew on a trip out west for a 72-hour halibut opening at some mandatorily unmentionable location where there were white wood halibut schooners and fish. We loaded up Will and Margie's 44-foot fiberglass boat, the Old Squaw. Somewhere around about 58 hours into that opening, I dozed off on the stool while coaling ground line. And Will was right beside me at the rail. He grabbed my nodding off head. He looked at me and said, so you still want to be a fisherman? That fall, Will and Margie moved out to Nuka Island, and they set up home there with their 2 boys in historic Harry and Pete's old house in the way back of Home Cove. Margie and the boys were often left there alone while Will and I fished for tanner crab in the outer district, where the moody Gulf storms and the moody Gulf rains, so many inches a day. When it's too rough for any delivery to pay, so it's safety over debt. And at Home Cove we slept as the rain on the sea got down to a depth it intaked into the fish hole of the tank down crabs we'd kept. So we threw them back into pots and then back over the side, trying to keep them alive, just to watch the sea otters dive into those plug pots and feast. And Big Will says to me, so, still want to be a fisherman? Off Wild Yellock Point, we were just one lone boat with all the arms of Nuka. One time, Will and I were setting gear at night, longlining conical pots. Will was driving from the flying bridge, and I was dancing on deck with the gear. You know, coil, pot, coil, pot, coil, pot, coil, pot. Then out goes the anchor line and buoy. Whew. That's when I noticed my gloved hands were sparkling seas phosphorescence, and the prop wash off the stern hurled phosphorescent fireballs into the calm Beauty Bay, which was reflecting the sky dancing crazily with green northern lights. And I hear Will yell up from the bridge, "So." I knew what he was going to say. "So you still want to be a fisherman?" That was the frame of the whole game. Not much measured in money or gradations degrees, more like satisfied answers, once asked in the breeze. Yes, of our real properties. Come what may, come what may. Like when Big Will just said, "So." And I knew what he was going to say. "So you still want to be a fisherman?" Which refrains to this very day. Thanks. Here comes Clark Whitney Jr.
All right, this is a song that I wrote a long time ago. It's about a foolish man who doesn't like to spill his coffee. It's a true story. Holloway, Bristol Bay, that's where I'll stay. In the summertime, fishing for the salmon. Now as a lad of 25 in the spring of '83, I flew into King Salmon, my old boat for to sea. I didn't know the engine was rusted good and tight. Had to get her down to Double N where the chief could make her right. Down the river my dad towed us, came too close to the rocks. But a 20-foot tide pushed us up to the outside of the dock. On the deck and in the warehouse where they used to store cans came the boatwrights and mechanics. I'd say it was all hands. Holloway, Bristol Bay, that's where I'll stay. In the summertime, fishing for the salmon. Now just outside the warehouse, mug up 3 times a day. You know it was more pleasant when young ladies came our way. One day I was back on my boat when those pretty girls walked in. Decided to go join them, forgot the open center pin. Fell face first in some brailers, stored in that open hole. In my right hand, my coffee cup had not yet gotten cold. It didn't hurt my body, cut sore my dignity. But when I stood, that paper cup retained integrity. Holloway, Bristol Bay, that's where I'll stay. In the summertime, fishing for the salmon. My friends cheered and applauded that feat as they stood by. But what vexed me most were the looks I saw in those young ladies' eyes. Ones of concern and laughter as my face burned bright red. I swore that in the future I'd watch where I did tread. I tell you now, I broke that vow more than a couple of times. A foolish man I'll always be, that's why I write these rhymes. Holloway, Bristol Bay, that's where I'll stay. In the summertime, fishing for the salmon. In the summertime, fishing for the salmon. Yep.
Thank you both. Pretty classic Fisher poetry and song there. Much, much appreciated. Coming in from the Kenai. Thanks everybody for sticking around. We got 2 more sets. I'm super excited to have Laura Messersmith-Glavin here today from Portland, or tonight, I suppose. Laura grew up fishing in the Kodiak salmon fleet from the time she was 2 until 21. Now a writer, teacher, and coach based in Portland. Her work spans the many places and lives she's lived since then, yet she always returns to the sea. I personally am super excited to announce also that she's got a book coming out, Spirit Things, a collection of essays, some of which some longtime Fisher Poets attendees may have heard. That comes out in spring 2022. So thanks again, and you're on, Laura.
Yay. Thank you so much, Elma. You guys, this is the best. I love you all. It's so great to see you. So the piece that I want to share tonight is not from that collection. I was looking for something short, and I ran across something really old called The Elements of Sound. And when I was kind of going through figuring what I could excerpt, I was really struck by the end of this bit, because when I was talking about one thing, it really felt like I was talking about the Fisher Poets. So I want to share with you a little tiny excerpt of that piece. It's the section on water. This is not a poem. This is an essay on the physics of sound. Growing up in the Kodiak fleet, I slept in a bunk in the forecastle of a boat with my head roughly at the waterline. And at night, among the creaks of lines under tension and the talks and bangs of equipment moving with the swell, I'd hear the water lapping against the hull. It was a gentle sound, sometimes liquid, sometimes like the light slap of a palm, depending on where the boat got caught in a trough. It was so common, this water sound, and yet I found it both familiar and full of horror. Rather than a rhythmic lullaby, the tiny dips and peaks of the wavelets pattered out to me, a constant reminder of the depths that lay beneath them. Abyss, they whispered, right here, inches away. Certain sounds are not about the transmission that creates them, but the receiver that gives them voice. Imagine that a drum talks not about the drummer, but about the skin with which it is made. The pitch and tone, the story it tells, is the skin itself speaking. The same patter on one head sounds different from another, so for me, the water speaking through the fiberglass of the hull did nothing to reassure me of the boat's seaworthiness. Instead, those gentle laps and droplets talked only about the thinness of the wall that separated me from it, the impossible depth that lay beyond. The sound of water moving gently is a different thing entirely from water moving fast or with force. On the beach of the Oregon coast, the restless waves crash and pull and sigh. Some find the sound relaxing. The thought that it never, ever stops, that it is there now, right now, smashing and dragging without pause, whether we are there to witness its movements or not. Sometimes this fills me with comfort, other times exhaustion. But this is what happens when water meets the world of the land and the sky. And what of the sounds below the surface? Sound moves more quickly through water than through air, its speed depending upon pressure and temperature. As the water grows deeper, it generally grows colder. When sound waves slip through colder water, they slow, which refracts them downward, bending them ever deeper. They're at their slowest when they hit the thermocline layer, where rapid changes in temperature occur, and below this layer, the pressure increases, which in turn increases the speed of the sound waves and refracts them upward. And in this way, the sound bounces back and forth as if trapped in a tube. These places in the ocean where sound waves bounce, refracting upward and down, encased by pressure, are known as sound channels. Like transatlantic telegraph tables, they allow for some underwater sounds like the song of a male humpback whale to travel thousands of miles without the signal losing strength. Did you know all male humpbacks within a region will sing similar songs? They copy and learn from one another. They borrow and riff and teach. Sometimes they sing choruses or duets. Distant communities may even pick up elements of other communities' songs through a form of cultural transmission. These songs range in length from 6 minutes to 30 and are often strung together in long chains, paragraphs, stories, sagas, refrains that are repeated for hours or even days. These songs demonstrate nested syntax, themes and subthemes, and a linguistic level of complexity, and like human languages, they evolve over time. Researchers say that once a whale song has changed, it is never repeated again. Think of this: music and language, traveling thousands of miles, a tradition of storytelling and singing, of sharing, of changing over time, below the surface and above. The water is both music and medium, the drummer and the drum. Thanks, guys. I miss you.
Oh, wow. Music and language, indeed. It's really been, thank you, Laura, for that. It's been a beautiful evening with you all and an honor to MC it. For those who don't know me, I am Elma. I'm the last performer here on this Friday night, but don't worry, there's one more night of Fisher Poets. It's tomorrow. Again, it's beginning at 6 p.m. The workshops that I mentioned for tomorrow require pre-registration. So if any of those piqued your interest, be sure to head to the website and register. I also want to shout out that some of our Fisher Poets typically sell work in the Gear Shack, and that's not an opportunity this year. So if you're interested in supporting your poets, check out some of their websites or follow them on social media, or check out the In the Tote collection that Pat Dixon has really put blood, sweat, and tears into online. That's also on the website. And finally, thanks to the organizers, John, Jay, Florence, Amanda, Jamie, all the MCs. Thanks for being here. I'll get to it and close us out and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. I'm a Bristol Bay fisherman, typically. I live in Bellingham, Washington, like I said, on Lummi and Nooksack territory. I grew up on Pequot and Mohegan lands in Long Island Sound. And usually I cheat the system a little bit at Fisher Poets and read an essay, even though John Broderick elbows me to come up with some poetry. And the 5-minute limit really reined me in this year, so that's good. But I do want to share some, tonight I'm just going to share some, well, first I'm going to share an essay title, which I really did get to writing this year, but it's not any good. So the 5-minute mark gave me a good pass, but if you come back next year, you might hear it. The title is One Man's Healing is One Octopus's Nightmare. What my octopus teacher says about the dangers of the male ego. You also might have to see the Netflix documentary to get what I'm getting at there, but watch it and then maybe we'll get to that in 2022. But for now, in my little block, I have some poetry. I was super grateful to share an evening of Fisher Poetry with Billy. I had a lot of tough conversations with Billy as she described this spring, and I also decided not to go back to Bristol Bay this summer following the tribal request that the fishery not happen. And I spent my summer back east on an oyster farm, trying to learn some unpatterning of white supremacist behavior in myself and decolonize my brain a little bit, which will be a lifelong process, I'm sure. But my summer back east was full of swimming, which I found, it's hot there. It's a very different climate than Alaska, and I found it to be a real balm. So this is one from this summer. Somehow in my little fishing inlet that I found near my parents' house, I happened to be in company with this older white man with an English accent. So that's who's in this with me. Dear Englishman on my swim, when your head goes under and your ears fill with water, eyes shut and lungs full of air, are you too wondering about abolition? Wondering if liberation feels even better than this, as good as this? If this feeling of buoyancy, lightness of water flowing gently through fingers and hair, and in the mouth and out the mouth, and under the suit and over the suit, if this feeling applied to laws, boardrooms, communities, in cities, if that would be liberation? Or are you simply wondering if there are sharks in here or what's for dinner? I tend to write on my notes app a lot. Inspiration is challenging to harvest at the right time, so I use my notes app a lot. And in preparing for Fisher Poets, I had to do some old harvesting back there. And I found a notes app that was just a running thing, but the title, the big block on my notes was Fisher Poets. So I worked that around, and that's this one. Fisher Poets. Write the Steam Ladies poem. Write the Shearwaters poem. Write the essay. Beach Peas. Is this the poem? How we peel off layers like the outgoing tide and reveal all that's underneath. How the birds traveled so far, only to find the troughs empty and landed dead at our feet. Write the persuasive essay about how a boat speaker is more important than gasoline, because the beach is willing to give up or sell a kicker can, but no one will give up their Wi-Fi to download Spotify playlists or lend out their loudest Bluetooth speaker. Write the personal essay about radio chatter and how it relates to feminism and communicating or over communicating, because someone else needs to hear it. Someone likely younger or greener than you who is pulling the mic away before they're done speaking or doesn't know how to blow it dry when it gargles. Is this the poem? I have one more. My last summer that I did fish was 2019, and Ugashik had a super long wait. We had to sit in a really hot Bristol Bay summer and wait for the fish to show up for almost 2 weeks, which is unusual for Bristol Bay. It's usually a high volume, very sprint of a fishery. This is from that summer. My favorite flower is not the bright pink fireweed, but the dark purple beach pea, now already dried up in early July. Soon to be unfolding tight purple-brown seed pods with 8 or 9 bumps a pop. They will dry there all summer. It's not until fall when they'll fall open, spilling seeds as swiftly as you might pour your morning cereal and unraveling as unnoticeably as your jacket zipper. No, instead, in late July, we have my second favorite, the bright pink fireweed, so named for its swaths of color it paints on the green tundra so quickly and so brightly it echoes the fires of the peninsula in my winter home of Washington. Below these tall stalks of magenta pink, the beach pea has since shriveled up and left just purple-brown pods. Purple-brown like the bay at dusk and at dawn. They are as pregnant as the bay is heavy with salmon. The purple-brown seed pods appear quietly like the river in those early weeks, finally empty of ice and still empty of salmon. They say the grass runs when the wind blows, blades shushing and slapping each other and anything nearby. Buildings, boats, trucks, rain gear, or sweatpants. The salmon appear to be waiting to run with the grass. So far this summer, the grass has kept quiet, managing to walk, maybe jog, but struggling to break a sweat and up its speed. We, on the other hand, we fishermen run the beach more on still summers with a heat more familiar to the asphalt parking lots of your local Fred Meyer at home than the shallow rivers and bays of southwestern Alaska. We run more when the salmon don't. To replace our fears that the wind has forgotten how to blow and that the salmon have gotten lost, we create the movement ourselves. Without the wind, the grass is still, but under our feet is the familiar shushing of toes displacing sand. Between our legs is the unfamiliar slapping of between our legs is the familiar slapping of blades of grass. Under each step, a purple-brown seed pod with an unknown future. Woo! Fisher Poets 2021 virtual Friday night set has come to a close. Thank you all so much for being here. This event really nourishes me. I hope it nourished you tonight, and can't wait to see you again tomorrow, and then hopefully dance and celebrate this industry with all of you in person in 2022. Thanks again.